Good morning. Hello, everybody. We are live with the Festival of Discovery this lovely Saturday morning. It's a beautiful sunny day here in Edinburgh, so I'm very excited to be with you for the next half an hour. So I'm really delighted to be back with Eden Project Communities, part of the Festival of Discovery. What an amazing couple of days. There's been so many different things. I had a great session yesterday. So my name is Mo, and I'm an artist based in Edinburgh at the moment, but I'm moving to Ireland in the new year. And my practice is all about getting people to embrace creativity into their lives and see how we can give objects a new life. So something like a recycled bird feeder, which is what we're doing for the next half an hour, really appealed to me because it kind of ticks all of the boxes of how can you give objects a new life that otherwise you might just dismiss? How can you bring creativity into your natural world? And how can you support bringing wildlife to you and, just taking it on yourself to make the world a little bit of a better place? So yeah, as I said, today we are making recycled bird feeders, but I have two different methods that you would have the two things for. So we're going to do one with a glass jar and one with a cardboard carton. And both of those are going to get transformed into bird feeders for your garden. So the RSPB encourages people to put out bird feeders all year round, not just for the winter months, but as we are heading into winter, it's a really great time to be putting them out into your garden. You want to encourage the wild birds into different spaces. That might be your garden, or I don't have a garden, so it's just my windowsill. They're a joy to watch. And why not? So the other thing is that you might want them to make them really beautiful. Especially if it's right at my window, I'm keen on making something that has a bit of a splash of color and looks kind of cool, and that I'm really proud that I made it myself. So we are live. A couple of technical things about that. It means that you can post a comment and ask a question, and I will get to it at the end of the session, because if I keep looking at the comments, then I'm going to get confused and the whole thing will go off the rails. And if there are any technical glitches, we will endeavor to make them work as fast as possible. So yes, two kinds, and they're just ideas. So hopefully, even if you aren't quite sure about, or you don't have the things that I'm showing, you might think, oh, but this would work for that. And I've got a few kind of adaptations. I'm pointing because I have like a whole list of things on my table. So before we get started actually making them, what makes a bird feeder? What are the elements that you need to put together? If you look online, there's such a host of ideas there. But again, I've referred back to the RSPB, so it's always good to check in with the people who are the experts, and RSPB definitely know their stuff. And what they say is that you need somewhere secure for the seed, and that different kinds of birds like different kind of food. So if you want to encourage different birds, or a very specific bird maybe, to your garden, have a look for what food they like. I have with me today, quite loud, try not, some unnetted fat balls that I just happen to have, but you can get all different kinds of seed. You can get it straight from the RSPB, but you can also go to your local bargain stores, garden centres, that kind of place always has them. So you need the food element. It needs to be secure, so it's somewhere that the birds can kind of see and get to. They will find it wherever you put it, but it's ideally, from some birds, they like it on the ground, but we're going to do ones that are hanging up in the trees or outside of a window. So you also want to make them so they're maybe a little bit difficult for predators to get to, say cats, or not too easy for squirrels, although that's like they're escape artists. I'm not sure how you would do that necessarily. But yeah, you want to not have gulls and pigeons and that kind of thing landing on them. So if they're quite small, they wobble a lot. And also a note from the RSPB is about keeping your bird seeds and your bird feeders as clean as possible. So thinking about, especially if you're using things like cardboard, how can you make them more sturdy? How can we make things that are going to last? So I'll be talking a little bit about that. So it's quite simple, really. Secure, somewhere for them to perch, put the seeds in, you're grand. So I'm talking a mile a minute, of course, because I know that I'm live. But yeah, we're going to start with the glass jar. I feel like I eat a lot of jam. I have a lot of glass jars and I reuse them for everything. So I usually have a glass jar in my house somewhere. Especially, this is good for if you have a glass jar, but you've lost the lid and you're kind of thinking, well, I like this glass jar. It's a nice glass jar. I would like to use it, but I can't find the lid. You don't need the lid for this. Your glass jar. This is method number one. And a perch that kind of fits with the glass jar. So I have this quite nicely natural looking stick that I found. I found this on the beach. But I also get a lot of Japanese takeout. So I have quite a lot of these wooden chopsticks, but I have my own chopsticks. They still deliver them sometimes. So I keep these, and these are really good. We'll be using these a couple of times. It kind of is a ready-made perch right there. And you will need some craft glue. And a little note on glue, always check when you're buying glue that it will glue the materials that you have. How many times have I made things and I've used PVA glue and it turns out PVA glue doesn't stick the things that I'm making. So always look on the back of your glue to see that it will in fact stick onto glass. Very helpful. Otherwise it'll all just peel off and you'll have to start getting nightmares. And you're going to need some thread, or well, not thread, something ideally quite thick. I'm finding when I buy things sometimes now they come with nice packaging. So I got this ribbon around a box and I put it in my craft box. And I think something you'll notice is I love to keep materials, especially if you're thinking of a project like this. It's always good to just start looking at things that people think are trash and how can you make those into treasure? How can you keep them and give them a second life? Something like this ribbon was probably never intended to be used again, but I think it's really quite lovely. You might want some other decorative elements. So I'm using threads and yarns today, but I also have next to me a little scrap of fabric. So there are other ways that you can decorate your glass jar. And then you'll need some sturdy string for hanging it up, something that's gonna last. Again, I think this is probably from an old net or something like that I just happen to have. So yeah, that's everything. You might need a pair of scissors around, but for this one, that's kind of it. So what we're aiming for, because I have one I made earlier, like my true dream of being a Blue Peter presenter, I get to live out my dream here. Here is one I made earlier. So this is kind of what we're aiming for. I mean, this is very, very little. I made this as a kind of test. You've got we're going to cover this. So it has this lovely kind of rustic cottage kind of look. And then we're going to attach in a perch. And then I think the best way to do it when you would hang it up would be to have it as a little bit of an angle so that all of the seeds don't just pour out onto the ground. And this would probably be good for like a sheltered space where it's not, if it gets windy, it's not just going to spray seeds everywhere. So you start with your glass jar. And feel free to craft along with me. If you do make any of these, please share pictures. I'd love to see them. But this will be up on the Eden Community's Facebook to refer back to. So I don't have time for glue to dry, so you'll have to excuse I'm using the magic of Blue Tack just to give the impression. So you start with your jar. It's nice to have a nice big jar like this. And then you start with a bit of glue right on the edge with I'm not sure what this bit's called. If anybody knows, please let me know. The thread. And then slowly, and the key with this when you're wrapping something is you would put dots of glue all the way down. So you've got a place for the yarn or the wool. Oh, it would look really lovely with different, the wool that kind of changes color as you go along. Yeah, that kind of thing. I'm going to use Blue Tack. Again, apologies. I'll have to glue this properly. It would be so messy if I tried to do it with glue now. So holding it in one hand, really gently stretching it out with the other, because you don't want it to be loose. And then slower you take this, the neater it will be. And of course, neat was never my exact strong point. But as you go, tapping it down so that it's on the glue and wrapping so that by the time you've completely finished, you end up with the jar. You can't see the jar underneath. You've got a nice, neat thread surface. Or actually, you know, ribbon does work really well because it's already flat. It's got quite a wide surface, and you could end up with this covered on. And what's really great about that is it looks really lovely, but unlike with fabric where you've got an odd shaped jar, it'd be quite difficult to stick on. And once you've completely covered it, I recommend giving it a seal spray with some kind of you get clear spray paint or a little lick of glue, maybe PVA glue or something over the top, just to give it a little bit of like security. And I think that this little piece of fabric that I've got, just instead of just, because you could just use the jar, maybe you have a really beautiful glass container, this would look great with that or something. But if you just have, like I do, tons of jam jars, you might want to just add a little bit of decoration. You could also paint the jars. I think that would be a lovely activity to do with some children. You could spray paint them and then draw on them. You can get really great paint pens. I'll be using some on the next kind of bird feeder. But I think there's just something really beautiful about taking the time just to add a little bit of color to something like this. I'm not sure the birds notice, but I definitely do when I'm looking at it. So we'll have to just pretend for now, for the live, that this is beautifully finished. You've let it dry, great. So now you need to have a think about what kind of perch you want to give your birds. I quite like the look of a stick. If you're picking anything up from nature, remember safety first. Look at where you found it. Is it clean? Is it dry? Is it safe to pick it up there? Always think, if you're handling natural materials, to wash your hands before you eat anything. I know we're all really great at washing our hands now. But I think I like to think that birds would sort of see the nature and be like, yeah, that's for me. I'm going to perch on that. Also, it kind of this piece I found has this natural kind of dip in it. And it sort of fits in there. Yeah, I can imagine a bird on that. So you might, if you have a wider jar that's quite large, put a couple so that they can kind of hop backwards and forwards. Or like mine's not a huge jar, so I'm just going to use one. Now, the lip of the jar is higher than the inside. So you end up with a nice angle. Great. But oops, did I drop it? No, got it. It does mean you have to be quite canny about sticking it on. So what I've done is, if you put a really big dot of glue, now there's a brand of glue that does it and it's quite gummy, Yoo-hoo glue. Really great for repairing. You'll know it's really sticky and gooey and it creates quite a big lump. Really useful for that. It will glue glass, I'm pretty sure. So you put one on the end of your perch and one on the rim, and then you stick the bottom right in so it's connecting and then attach to the rim. And that means even though there's a gap, you can see there, well, you maybe can't see that well, but if you look underneath your jar, there's a gap, but that doesn't matter, as long as you've got two good points of contact. And then there you go. And then peg, a clip peg on the rim to make sure it doesn't move anything. Give it a good 12 hours, somewhere nice and warm and dry. And there you have it. You'll have something like this. So there's lots of variations with this. That's just a really basic idea. And I've whizzed through it because we're only here for half an hour today. But the last bit is attaching something to hang it up with. And I think the angle is quite important here, and the placement, because these will probably move around in the wind, so you might want to have them in a more sheltered spot. I do think the angle, so that the perch is perched slightly up the way, so that the jar is like just a little bit up, so that the seed kind of sits in here without it all kind of pouring out. So when you're attaching your hanging thread, the same method that we did for the perch is look for the glue that will actually work. I don't recommend drilling holes in glass. It's really dangerous. You know, if you're using other materials, there's drill bits and things like that. But I really think just tying things on, using sturdy glue checking them every so often, making sure they're nice, and making things, if you're going to put them outside, if it's your garden, keep an eye on it. Try and avoid things that are too plasticky, so that if they, a bit of it fell off, it wouldn't just become rubbish. So really great to use nice cotton threads, cotton string. This is cotton ribbon. You get that lovely twine. Yeah, I have some here. I think this has a very cottage core look, and I like that. I think that's really nice. Yeah, and just keeping an eye on your things, and when you're hanging it up, just double check before you hang it up, because I dropped mine and got birdseed everywhere. That it's nice and secure. Always add a little extra glue if you need to. Great, so some variations on this. I had a look around my house and I thought, well, yeah, glass jar, suitable, but what else do you have if you don't maybe eat as much jam as I do? Flower pot. I just have this it's very flimsy, this one, so I think I would really want to add some structure to it using some, I don't know, colorful card that I would then paint, and I would want to cover the holes at the back because I feel like all the seeds would come out of there, but actually it does make it quite handy because you can just tie, before you do that, your hanging thread all the way through because there's holes at the back. I also have this lovely, I think I got this from IKEA, or maybe it was just in our house when we moved in, but I thought that this also would look really nice and wouldn't maybe need that much decoration because it's already quite pretty. And I can imagine just looking out of my living room window and seeing the birds coming in and out. So super simple, really effective, a lovely thing to do together with family on a sort of winter's rainy afternoon, and just know that you're kind of helping out our feathered friends and increasing biodiversity in your immediate area. So I'm just going to put those aside. The next one involves a little bit more techniques, things to do. So the next thing that I create a lot of is oat milk cartons. I drink a lot of oat milk and I end up with tons of these, and I always just flatten them and put them in the recycling. But they're actually a really useful shape, especially if you are thinking about something a little bit more snazzy, a little bit more creatively involved. So for this, you'll need some kind of cardboard carton. You will need a craft knife, or at a push, a sharp pair of scissors, but you have to be quite careful with this part of it. You'll need some paper tape, or decorative tape. I only have black decorative tape at the moment for some reason. Some paint pens, Sharpie pens. I've got some patterned paper. Again, you'll need some sturdy thread. Oh, I have some paint as well. I don't have time for painting, but yeah, right now that would look really great. And yeah, again, chopsticks. In this case, I would probably recommend chopsticks over natural twigs, just because they're really sturdy, and you'll see why we need those when I get to it. But some long, like even to push an old pencil or some old pens would work for this as well. Again, you'll need some craft glue and some scissors, general crafting equipment. Oh, and because I mess this up every time, something to mop up the inevitable water from when you've washed this out, especially if you're going to do your decoration first. So what we're going to do, I have one I made earlier, but I was experimenting with this one. So is we cut a little window. You can see I've gone all the way through to the other side because I was thinking, but I think this is too big because the rain would get in, your seeds wouldn't stay dry. You want a kind of a small window because, again, we're encouraging smaller birds. There we go. And then to create those, oh, I've done the wrong way. To create those perches there so they can kind of go in. So you can see I've hastily stuck some circles to the outside of this, but what I found when I did it, top tip, do your decoration first. Paint it, color it, decoupage, which is where you stick pattern paper over the top. Do all of that as much as possible on the outside first, because as soon as you cut it, it loses a little bit of its structure. So it becomes a little harder to decorate, unless you really wanted to make a pattern that had, you know, the perfect piece cut in it. But if I did it fully again, or when I do it fully again, I'm going to cover it in some pattern paper or fabric or however first, and then cut it. So with the lid taken off, I think, or actually maybe it doesn't matter, I'm going to mark out with a pen. And again, another top tip is always mark out where you're going to cut before you cut. Useful. And this little window needs to be, I think, quite small. I wouldn't have it too close. You want to leave a little edge. Oops, sorry. There. You don't want it right up to the corner. So I'm just going to draw myself a little square. And again, if you are a younger person, maybe get a grown person, or to be honest, even for someone like, you know, me, it's always nice to have another person around, just to give you your safety, make sure you're clear, make sure you're concentrating what you're doing. If you're using craft knives, only takes a second in a slip for things to go wrong. So you don't want your craft knife too far out. But because it's cardboard, it's not that difficult to cut, but I'm just making so the two up and down lines first, and I'm kind of holding the sides to make it easier, and then I'm joining those up with a kind of sewing motion. With the limitations of my camera, you'll have to imagine what I'm doing. You kind of see my hand. There we go. So it's a bit rough and ready, but this is where I would go in with some paper tape and just, that's not so bad. I did wash this, honest. And you want it, again, this is quite a nice height. You want it quite up from the top because we're going to make a cut in there first. I'm just going to go in with some tissue before I get water everywhere. So yeah, making that nice and sturdy. And again, thinking about the longevity of this, is it going to be outside all winter? You want to keep things nice and sturdy. So there we go, even. And then looking for your center, and if you are into measuring things, definitely keep it. The neater you can do these things, the more beautiful they look. I'm just going to eyeball the center, and I'm going to make a small cross incision, which can be a little difficult, but just take your time. You can see I've made just a small cross, and then the center at the back, I'm going to do the same, about the same. So I've done that probably 2 centimeters up and make a small cross. And that is going to be for our perch. I'm sure the birds would find a way in without the perch, but that means you can take your chopstick and you've got a little place for them to perch. And that's, I mean, it's, you could leave it as this. You can have, imagine that you've decorated and you've got it. Birdseed goes in there, hang it on a tree. Fantastic. I've seen other bird feeders where you could put another chopstick through another hole and have something solid like the fat ball that kind of balances on top, and you can encourage, because it's got this quite nice pillar shape. I'd also recommend if you could put some stones in the bottom, makes it a little bit less tippy, a little bit more stable. Also, because you'll see you'd have to fill this up quite a lot with seeds. You might just want to put a few in. I think the decoration for these is sort of key. I thought that there was quite a nice way of putting some eyes on or something, make it into a bit of a monster with a mouth. Again, I think this would be really fun to do rainy Sunday afternoon, crafting inside. And it just shows that you don't actually need to go to Hobbycraft or any one of these other big craft stores and buy lots of expensive materials and buy lots of new things. You've probably got these kind of materials just in your house kicking about. How can you make them into things that you will enjoy looking at every day and think, yeah, I did that. So if you are going to draw with paint pens on the carton, they are a little bit water resistant. So you either get an oil paint pen or give it a paint over with some PVA glue first. There we go. Kind of gross, but also great. And then when you're hanging it up, you can make holes, or it's got this handy hole in the top where you can make a hole and hang it up. Easy peasy. Great. So let me just double check. We're doing okay for time. Amazing. So I think, yeah, if you take anything away from this session and me talking about recycled bird feeders, is that they don't have to be complicated. They don't have to cost you lots and lots of money from the garden centre. They can be something you just give yourself a break, enjoy an afternoon, have a look in your recycling bin, think about the materials that you create on a daily basis that maybe should be reused rather than sent to the recycling. For me, that's obviously oat milk cartons and jam jars. And when you're thinking about bird feeders, there's a lot of inspiration online, but think about UK sources, if you're in the UK, or your country, wherever you are, your location sources on your local birds. What food do they like to eat? What are your local predators? Is there a huge squirrel population, just over the wall like we have here? How can you kind of mitigate that? And just have some fun and make something really beautiful. So all you really need is something to keep the seeds secure, something that you can keep quite clean, and somewhere for the birds to perch. And hopefully they'll come flocking to your garden. So we're at time, but I think I saw some questions. So you'll just have to excuse me while I scroll and do my best to read them. Oh, people getting Blue Peter badges. I got a Blue Peter badge when I was a kid. I think I drew a picture of a broomstick. Whippets, yes, my dog. Oh, I've clicked on one. That was silly. Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay. So Pam said do the 25 millimeter, 35 millimeter, 45 millimeter rule, depending on bird type. I think that refers to the length of the perch, if I'm not wrong. So do have a look at the RSPB. When I looked there as inspiration as an artist of what I was going to make and how I was going to make it, really useful to go for those, sources of knowledge and what can you do. Yes, PVA or spray painting with clear things, and just to make things, especially if you've added something like yarn or fabric or something, just to give it a little bit of extra sturdiness. All right. I hope that you guys have enjoyed me rambling on about my passionate things, and that you can see I really love making these things, and hopefully it's given you a bit of inspiration to do it as well. These instructions will be left up on Facebook so you can watch them again, or just pop back to the bits that you need to. I'm doing another session at 11:30 for primary school age kids on wind catchers. So if you want to come along, I will be live again in half an hour once I've changed all my setup. And also something super useful, and that I definitely need to do, if I've got holes in this jumper, is visible mending at 2:00. The visible mending movement is incredible, and I always really enjoy seeing people where they've made a really beautiful patch. So do come along, head to the Festival of Discovery website and see all of the other amazing things that there are online. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and I will hopefully enjoy seeing your bird feeders in the future. All right, thanks so much. Bye.